konnichiwa.
Yes! Here we go!
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, you got a question for yourself and I've got an answer. Should you buy a Nintendo DS or 3DS in the year of 2024? The short answer is absolutely. This is 100% one of my favorite consoles to collect for nowadays. The library is still fantastic. There's so many gems that I think will forever be stuck on this system because it's really hard to rebuild a DS game for modern platforms without going all the way to the roots and building it again from the ground up. Certain projects are worth it, but there are many hidden gems on the DS. It was a hybrid between the Game Boy Advance, exclusive DS games, occasionally getting ports of classic NES and SNES games. Like, it was a jack of all trades and master of them too. Now, as you probably already know, there are a ton of Nintendo DS and 3DS versions to go through, and I'll walk you through what version I think is the best, as well as what games I'd recommend for both families of the system. Now, keep in mind the Nintendo 3DS is backwards compatible with most Nintendo DS games, excluding ones like Guitar Hero on Tour. We'll talk about that a little bit later, and that the original Nintendo DS does have Game Boy Advance compatibility, so you may find yourself wanting a little of both depending on how you want to consolidate your collection. I'll walk you through it all. If you're new here and you're into what systems you should buy, we've done buying guides for the PS Vita, the PS3, the Xbox 360. Now we're doing the DS and we have much more to go through this year. So if you're new here, consider subscribing for more buying guides. Let's start off with the family of systems. You have the original Nintendo DS, and you know what this one features, right? The dual screen, the stylus, all that fun stuff. But the most noteworthy things are the battery life and the fact that it is Game Boy Advance compatible. Now, the battery life on this, depending on your brightness settings, can last about 6 to 10 hours. The Nintendo DS Lite was the first revision to the Nintendo DS. It's slimmer and way more portable. It comes with a brighter screen. It still is Game Boy Advance compatible. In fact, this is the last one to be Game Boy Advance compatible, and the battery life has been optimized a bit more and can last 7 to 10 hours. The Nintendo DSi was the follow-up revision to this with no Game Boy Advance compatibility because, according to Nintendo, this would improve portability without sacrificing durability, which I don't know if you've ever seen a Nintendo DS with the Game Boy Advance slot, but I don't know how this is affecting the portability or the durability, and this just goes right in here and it's kind of like a seal for itself. I don't get it, but I imagine there were cost reasons behind this, and this is just a convenient statement for Nintendo. Anyway, the Nintendo DSi, since it does not have that Game Boy Advance functionality, means some DS games were not compatible. I mentioned earlier Guitar Hero on Tour. There are certain games on the Nintendo DS that require both slots. This is one of them because you put the game in the top slot and then the little guitar functionality in the bottom slot. So you wouldn't be able to play that on your DSi. So couldn't really utilize everything. And last but not least, there were 2 internal cameras that could be used for it. There were various types of storage support, and the battery would last about 6 to 8 hours. Then there was the XL version of the DSi, which is just a bigger version of the DSi, and the battery could last up to 10 hours depending on your brightness settings. The Nintendo DS is not hard to find for a great price. You can get them for very cheap, especially if you get one that's kind of used and dinged up. And these are really durable systems. They last a long while. So you can really go with any of these in the family, depending on what you're really looking for here, because price-wise, you're going to be in a good area no matter what. What I'd personally recommend is the Nintendo DS Lite. I think it's best to have the Game Boy Advance support option there available for you. I think that just helps consolidate your collection a little bit further, where if you don't want to spend the money on a Game Boy Advance or like the Analog Pocket, your DS will do just fine. A lot of my Game Boy Advance playthroughs happened on the Nintendo DS growing up. It was just such a convenient factor there. And especially if you don't care about complete in box, you can just gather a ton of cartridges, throw them in a drawer somewhere, and now you've, again, really optimized your collection, which is what I always recommend to people. You don't have to be weird like me and you see the rotating shelves behind me. I love having my collection. I love getting complete in box, but I also understand that's not the case for everybody. So if you're really looking to optimize and be practical with your setup here and you don't want the original experience, so to say, like, oh, I need to play Game Boy Advance games on the Game Boy Advance, then I would say the DS Lite is your best option. It's really small, really good for portable options. It is the quintessential fit in your pocket handheld system right next next to the Game Boy Advance SP. I think it is beautiful for that, and having the Game Boy Advance support on top of it, plus better battery life, makes it the best bang for your buck, in my opinion. I don't think you're really going wrong with the original DS, but it's a little clunky, it's a little snappy. It's also a scratch machine, depending on who owned it beforehand. So just keep that in mind when shopping. Now we move on to the Nintendo 3DS, which also has a family of 4 that we're going to go through. We have, of course, the Nintendo 3DS itself, which is capable of displaying 3D imagery, and you can actually save battery life by not using this at all. The camera from the DSi and DSi XL returned with an improved lens. There's also a circle pad or analog stick that you could use for movement on top of the D-pad, giving, again, more 3D capabilities. There are motion and gyro capabilities that are supported in certain games. And also a reminder really quickly when we get into the game selection here that the 3DS digital storefront is down now. So you can only get the games I'm going to recommend here physically. And that also means that the virtual console is out of the question, meaning even Game Boy Advance games are available either through Nintendo Switch Online, or you can go ahead and buy them physically yourself. Now, the battery life for the 3DS would go about 3 to 5 hours, again, depending on brightness settings, how often you use the 3D imagery, all of this would play a factor. Then there was the Nintendo 3DS XL. Think of this like the DSi to the DSi XL, where you would just have larger screens, same resolution, a little bit of a better battery life, where the DS XL could actually last up to 6 hours. Then there was the Nintendo 2DS. This is the one I have actually never owned because I think it honestly is an abomination. There's no 3D imagery here, and it's what I like to call snap freeze. You remember how I was showing you a little bit of this? Kids don't like this. Kids sometimes go a little too far with this and then go back one more click and suddenly you're down a 3DS. So yeah, the 2DS is great if you're looking for something that's kid friendly. It's extremely sturdy and you really don't have to worry about this thing getting banged up at all. It's arguably the most durable handheld made. It still supports 3DS games, it just doesn't again display it in 3D imagery, also making it a pretty cost-effective option. Then there is the new Nintendo 3DS plus the new Nintendo 3DS XL, and also, if you want this option available to you, the new Nintendo 2DS XL, which I'll just preface all of this by saying that the new Nintendo 2DS XL has all the same features as the 3DS, just no 3D imagery, so keep all of that in mind moving forward. So what does the new Nintendo 3DS include? It's a more powerful GPU, it used the system's gyroscope and camera actually to track the player's eyes to sustain the 3D effect. If you were an early adopter of the Nintendo 3DS, you'll remember that the 3D option really worked on perfect angles, and I found myself while playing games really focusing on trying to get the right angle more than the actual game itself. So I would end up turning off the option whenever I could. And then eventually I sold my 3DS until Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance came around. I said, okay, I'll try the 3DS XL again. And that's when I really got into the 3DS more so toward the end of its lifespan, because the new 3DS actually does make it where the 3D effect is kind of tantalizing, because it was spotty before, but yes, your system is watching you in real time. You have Amiibo compatibility without any peripherals required. There's a ZL and ZR shoulder button available to you. There's also a C stick, and that means that there are exclusive games for this system. The list is Xenoblade Chronicles 3D, Binding of Isaac Rebirth, Fire Emblem Warriors, Wind Up Night 2, Runbow Pocket, Future Rhythm EP Deluxe, Blockform, Pixel Hunter, Life Speed, which is available on the eShop, Pinball Hall of Fame, Dragon Fang, SNES VC, and Minecraft New Nintendo 3DS Edition. Other games are enhanced. For example, Smash Bros supports the C-Stick for smash attacks. Most of these games have improved load times. Azure Striker Gunvolt allows you to cycle weapons with the shoulder buttons, and so on. Plus, the battery life can last up to 6 hours. I'll always remember playing Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology on a flight home from California, and my 3DS went the whole way. And I actually remember beating the game on that flight, which was about close to 6.5 hours. So not too shabby there for this little new Nintendo 3DS XL. So I know we've been going through systems a lot, much longer than previous buying guides, but there's just, as Nintendo does, so many iterations. So which one should you get? I think the options are pretty simple here. If you're shopping for a kid, I don't think you can go wrong with the 2DS. You just don't have to worry about your money being wasted, frankly. Like this thing, unless they throw it down into a toilet, this is gonna last them a long while. So if you're worried about, hey, I want my kid to get into handheld gaming, but I don't want them to break anything or get clumsy with it or trip and fall and break it, like this is sturdy, you can really rely on it. There's so many great reviews out for the sturdiness of the 2DS. Otherwise, my personal suggestion would be to get your hands on a new Nintendo 3DS, preferably the XL. As someone who also abandoned the 3DS, my hands cramped a ton. And that's why I moved over to the Vita. It just felt way better in my hands. Sure, there's grips and peripherals you can get to improve that experience, but I just think the new Nintendo 3DS XL is great when it comes to form factor. Obviously, you get all the bonuses of improved load times. It runs all of your old DS games, so there's that too, where they just quickly load up and you fly through them. You get access to a huge library of games. They run the best they possibly can. You get all the control options, and it kind of removes the question marks of does this work, doesn't this work? So if you were to ask me, you want to go to the other extreme here in the Nintendo 3DS family and get the XL. That is the most expensive version, especially in the new family. If it doesn't really speak to you, no biggie, but I do think this is the best option for you. And unfortunately, because a lot of these that were made were a part of special bundles, they had like Pokemon ones, they had Animal Crossing ones. You see I have the Zelda one here, which is funny because I'm not even that big of a Zelda fan. That made it where these go for a lot of money nowadays. So just keep that in mind when shopping. Anyway, now with all of the hardware recommendations done with, we can finally get into some game suggestions. So let's do just that, shall we? All right, let's start off with a fun collection here. We have the Mega Man Star Force games. So you have Star Force 3 Red Joker, Star Force 3 Black Ace, and think of this a lot like Pokemon, where you had like red and blue. Same thing here with Mega Man Battle Network, and in turn, its DS counterpart, Mega Man Star Force. You had Zerker X Ninja, and there's also a second version of 2 that I have yet to collect. And then you had Star Force Pegasus and Leo. Now, I recommend if you're into these types of games, you can look up what version speaks to you the most. There are minimal story differences, but otherwise, for those of you who know my love of Mega Man Battle Network, this is a pretty much unexplored franchise for me outside of like 10 hours into Star Force Pegasus. I absolutely love what I have played of this though. It is pretty much the same combat system from Battle Network, except much more 3D and vertical instead of horizontal. And it makes a lot of quality of life improvements that, honestly, as someone who's a huge fan of the Battle Network combat system, I'm really impressed with how they've carried things forward here. The story is also much more serious and somber, where I feel like Battle Network is a feel-good franchise. Star Force, I'm not going to say it's going to outright give you crippling depression, but it is a lot more sad out the gate. It is a lot more serious in its tone. And I think because of that, it may speak to a lot of you. I mean, you look at some of the imagery here, like from Red Joker, and you can see, yeah, it takes itself pretty seriously. And these are largely overlooked. At the same time, they're also pretty expensive. Buyer beware. Mega Man has been on a collection spree. We just got Battle Network. The question is Capcom gonna do Legends? Are they gonna do Star Force? So this could get a modern re-release soon. So maybe avoid these potentially until you see what Capcom does next, but they're still clearly doing all these Mega Man collections. So it's up to you if you wanna take the dive, but from what I've played, they're pretty great. What's a Nintendo DS collection without Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days? In my opinion, absolutely still worth owning. Really an amazing spin-off story where it focuses on Organization 13. Yes, I know Kingdom Hearts stories get more convoluted, but this is a really good focused one, and the ending is phenomenal. Also, the reason it's great to own is because what you have here is a game that has remastered cutscenes in all of the HD versions of Kingdom Hearts, but the only place you can play it still is your DS or 3DS. And I think being able to play as Roxas is absolutely worth the price of admission. I got this one complete box for about 35 bucks, but yeah, as a Kingdom Hearts lover, this is an easy recommendation for me. Definitely make sure you get this in your collection. Now, what is a Maddie video of any kind where I'm making game suggestions without bunch of anime games to throw your way? We have some Naruto ones for you. We have Path of the Ninja. Path of the Ninja is a turn-based Naruto game. I am not as crazy about Shippuden compared to OG Naruto. Part of that is nostalgia bias. I grew up with OG Naruto. I also think a lot of the storytelling can be really great in OG Naruto. Not that Shippuden can't be, but there's just something wholesome yet powerful about OG Naruto. So you get a turn-based story here. Think of this like a game we'll talk about in a little bit, DBZ Attack of the Saiyans, except it's Naruto. Maybe not as good, but I think still awesome to have, and I wish there were more turn-based anime games in general nowadays. You also have Naruto Ninja Council 3. There's also Ninja Council 4 on the DS. Meanwhile, Ninja Council 1 and 2 are locked off on the Game Boy Advance. So if you get your original DS, you can get the whole family there, provided you have the Game Boy Advance backwards compatibility option available to you. With that in mind, I will just warn people with Ninja Council. Many disagree with me, but I think the best Ninja Council game is Ninja Council 1. I think from there, it doesn't really get better. But many people do kind of find these games to be guilty pleasures. I just think the first Ninja Council is a really competent side scroller. It has cool replayability, cool unlocks. Like, we've made a whole retrospective on it if you want to check it out. But otherwise, the rest of the Ninja Council games, I'm not as crazy about. So go as you please with that one. And the last Naruto rec is Ninja Destiny. Now, there is a first Ninja Destiny, but this one has more fighters. It's got 34. It's got a quest mode. You can fight friends wirelessly if they also have the game. And yeah, I think this is just kind of an overlooked one, right? You have a 3D fighter on the Nintendo DS. So yeah, a lot of great Naruto games to pick up on the Nintendo DS. But don't worry, JRPG fans, I'm not leaving you out to dry here. Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings. So if you're like me, and you really like Final Fantasy XII and you want more, you can actually get what is effectively a sequel story to Final Fantasy XII here. You'll see on the back, they say 1 year has passed since the events of Final Fantasy XII. Vaughn is now a full-fledged sky pirate and Penelo his trusted navigator. When they stumble upon the legendary sky continent of Lemures, it's up to them to defend it from the evils of the outside world. And this game has great reviews. I have yet to play it. I know I've said it quite a few times already this video, but I just want to put this out there as sort of a awareness type of purchase. Like, hey, even though I haven't played it, you might want to be aware of this because many people like me love Final Fantasy XII. So I can't wait to one day get to that and make a retro rebound on it. I can't believe I'm suggesting this, but look, I gotta put it out there. Drawn to Life deserves some attention here on this channel, and this is the way I'm gonna do it. So I have the SpongeBob SquarePants edition here. If you've never played Drawn to Life, prepare to have your mind blown. It's exactly what it sounds like. You're gonna run around this game, they're gonna say, hey, you want a weapon? Okay, draw it yourself. Hey, you wanna make a character? Draw it yourself. And it has you drawing everything in the world. And yes, as a kid playing this game, we'll just say the imagination ran wild with all sorts of crude imagery that I could include in the game so you could get as wacky or as artistic as you want. There's some really great examples of people doing legit art in Drawn to Life, and it's really cool to see what people came up with. But I just think it's an awesome gimmick that uses the DS to its full capability, and it's a game that can only exist on the DS. So shout out to Drawn to Life. I mentioned Dragon Ball earlier. We have some Dragon Ball games here. Attack of the Saiyans, we have done an individual deep dive here on the channel if you want to check that out. But Attack of the Saiyans is a turn-based Dragon Ball game, and one of my favorite things about it is a large focus is on the Z Warriors. This is all about the Saiyan saga and a turn-based game on that. So like some of your starting party members are Yamcha and Krillin and Tien, and they all have their own special moves, and it's actually kind of difficult. It's a really fantastic game. Of course, with the sprite art, which is very much prevalent in many of these DS games, yeah, like this wins me over pretty easily. Dragon Ball, turn-based, sprite art, really good story, really good progression, very little grinding, like it's awesome. You would really love this game if you enjoy Dragon Ball and turn-based, so check it out. Meanwhile, we have an interesting one here in Dragon Ball Z, Haru Kanaro Den Setsu. What you'll see on the back here, it says, play your cards right. The fate of the planet is in your hands as you struggle against the most fearsome and evil fighters in the universe with 512 card combinations that are possible. I'm a sucker for card games, especially ones that were made before a microtransaction era where I understand there's a bit of a stigma to them. As someone who grew up with legendary Super Warriors on the Game Boy Color, that is a game that I have a love-hate relationship for. And I know that was also a turn-based Dragon Ball game that involved a little bit of deck building. So this is a bit of an evolution on that idea, and I found it to be quite great and definitely overlooked, like one of the least known Dragon Ball games. So one day, as we have gradually progressed through the entirety of the Dragon Ball library, we'll do a retrospective on it, but that's one that you should definitely be aware of. Now, of course, what is a Nintendo system without Pokemon? And as you can see, the stack is so big, it's out of the camera. So let's get started. Of course, there are Pokemon remakes that you should consider. Now, depending on how far you want to go with these, they can be very pricey, like what I've got here, an acrylic case in Heart Gold with the Pokewalker accessory complete in box. I love this game, so I was 100% willing to spend the bread on it. So it's up to you how far you want to go with it, but you do have great Pokemon remakes absolutely stranded on this system. Now, knowing Nintendo, they can kind of at any moment smash the glass and hit the emergency button and get this game out on Switch, but I don't know if they will for a while. So you have Heart Gold here on the DS, 100% worth it. You've got some weird ones here. Pokemon Troze, you also have Pokemon Dash. I just am personally one of those people who sees the value of Pokemon and says, okay, I'll buy it. Like that's how I go with it because I don't want to have any regret of, as you can see, the prices here were very cheap, around the $20 price range, and they've gone up since a little bit. And they'll continue to go up because Pokemon is just this roller coaster that typically is trending upwards. Now, Pokemon Dash here is a little bit of a racing game where it says make tracks as you put Pikachu through its paces, speeding around the course, race against the clock and other Pokemon rivals, passing the checkpoints as you head toward the goal. Not the most exciting Pokemon game ever, but it's a racing game for Pokemon if you're interested. And then Trilogy is a puzzle game here, which is kind of underrated. It says rescue stolen Pokemon from the evil organization in an adventure mode. And you'll see here, slide the Pokemon puzzle pieces from side to side or up and down. A little bit of that Tetris energy, if you will. So if you like puzzle games, Pokemon's got you covered, or like runner games, sure, why not? If you want to destroy your screen, let me introduce you to the game that will handle that for you, Pokemon Ranger. One of these days, I do want to do a Trilogy recap because I played a little bit of the first one, felt like I was developing carpal tunnel, and then, moved on with my life. But now in my young adulthood, I would like to give these games a second chance because I've heard that, especially in the later games like Shadows of Almia, as well as Guardian Signs, the story gets really good. I also love that the focus is a little bit of Gen 2, Gen 3. You can see as they progress through the generations on the cover art here, like you see a lot of Gen 1 imagery, then you see Entei like Gen 2 and Gen 3. So yeah, really cool to see how the story has progressed. But these are games that when you capture Pokemon, you're drawing circles around them on the bottom screen, and you're gonna keep going and keep going and keep going, and your arm will get tired. Like, this is a game where you gotta just take breaks throughout, but that is available on the DS and only the DS. So if you're interested, the Pokemon Ranger family is waiting for you, as is Mystery Dungeon. Now, there is Blue Rescue Team as well, which is exclusive to the DS, whereas Red Mystery Dungeon is on the Game Boy Advance. They do have a remake. I prefer the original art style, so I would recommend the more DS-oriented Mystery Dungeon games. But also on the DS is arguably, to many, the best ever Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game, and that is Explorers of Sky, which many people say they're still emotionally recovering from, and I can leave it there on the story conversation. When it comes to the gameplay, it is the same Mystery Dungeon stuff that you've come to know and love, except just bigger and better compared to Blue Rescue Team at the time. So yeah, I love Mystery Dungeon, arguably more than the mainline series. And I would recommend, if you're looking for like deep, gritty, dark, sad stories in Mystery Dungeon, we'll talk about more later, you should definitely look into the Mystery Dungeon series. And then we've done an individual deep dive on this. Pokemon Conquest is phenomenal. Nobunaga's ambition crosses with Pokemon in a tactics game. Do you need to hear more? No, like that's what I'm talking about. There's so many gems just locked off on the DS. It's unbelievable. So yes, the Pokemon library is 100% sick when it comes to the Nintendo DS. Two more Square Enix JRPGs to wrap things up. You have Dragon Quest games, which are often considered best played on the Nintendo DS. You can get Dragon Quest VIII on 3DS. I don't own that yet because it is quite pricey, but these are some of the best places to play classic JRPGs. Speaking of which, Chrono Trigger. This is the best place to play one of the most famous JRPGs ever. And so if you do not have the DS version and you want to experience the best version, you'll want to go ahead and pick this one up. So yeah, across the board, just a phenomenal library for the Nintendo DS, from JRPGs to action games to turn-based games to tie-in games. There's a lot of good stuff here. So hopefully you found something you liked. And as always, if there's games that you want to suggest for me and others to pick up, comments are down below for you to express that. But before that, I also forgot, I've made like 2-3 retrospectives on this game. Best side scroller I've ever played. Check out Revenge of the Sith. Let's move on to the Nintendo 3DS library. My personal favorite ever Fire Emblem game is here on the Nintendo 3DS family in Fire Emblem Awakening. You can also get Birthright and Conquest. The third version of those is missing because it was available through the eShop, so that was like one of the key purchases to make at the time and put it on your memory card. But to me, it just hasn't gotten better than Awakening since. And I know that might be sacrilege to some, but I love Awakening's story. I love its characters. I love that it has the focus of shipping characters and them having kids and then building an army out of those kids who then meet up and have kids of their own. Like, it's just a really cool gameplay gimmick. Like, I'm usually not into the whole romance storylines in gaming unless they're done extremely well. Like I think of Knights of the Old Republic as my favorite example, but I really do think Fire Emblem had something special when they walked away from that to be more Persona-like. They left behind a lot of its spirit. And so Fire Emblem Awakening has a lot of that. I think games like Birthright are still great in that you'll like manage your own castle, or Conquest is a more difficult version of that. And I think it has a little bit of a better story, but Awakening is just downright phenomenal. The map design is incredible, leading to some really tense encounters. The permadeath factor was here, but this is the first game to also introduce like, hey, you don't want to mess with permadeath, you can turn that off. So yeah, it was to me like the perfect hybrid between old and new Fire Emblem. And I haven't really loved this series as much since Awakening. Final Fantasy Explorers is a really cheap, overlooked game that if you're looking for great pick up and play replayability on your 3DS, this is a great game. You'll see here on the back, it says explore a new world solo or together with players, with 20 jobs and a ton of missions to go through. If you can have friends that you can play this with, even better, but this has tons of missions to do. It's very much Monster Hunter meets Final Fantasy. It's really cool stuff. So just wanted to throw that out there, especially as a cheap option for those of you who are looking for something a little different. Dragon Ball Fusions is one of my favorite Dragon Ball games ever. I love turn-based Dragon Ball, if you couldn't tell. Like, of course, we have a million 3D fighters, but then because of that popularity, it gave birth to more niche style games. And Dragon Ball Fusions is really cool because you can fuse together popular characters in the Dragon Ball world and make your own. It's pretty much a hybrid between the idea of Pokemon and Battle Network, as well as just including Dragon Ball characters from all the eras: GT, Dragon Ball Super, Dragon Ball Z. There's a ton of DLC that you now can't access, but this game is outright phenomenal, and some of the fusion combinations are hilarious. So you'll want to see that for yourself, but Dragon Ball Fusions is an easy recommendation for me. I want to throw out Yokai Watch. I'm not too crazy about this game, but people love level 5 games. This is more of like a spirit catching game that I remember when I was on a little bit of a Pokemon kick, people were saying like, check out Yokai Watch. I remember the reviews for the original at least were really good. It seems like over time, to my memory, it's gotten a little more mixed. It's never fully appealed to me from what I've played. It is a little cheery and happy-go-lucky, which many of you already know. I like a little grit and a little darkness in all my stories. Those are definitely my favorite. Not that I can't enjoy something a little fun, but definitely if you're looking for a more kid-friendly game, again, I mentioned earlier, shopping for like a younger one here, this is a great game to look into in Yokai Watch, and also really cheap. I remember that game actually I got from GameStop for like $9. So yeah, really cheap if GameStop's giving it to you for $9. We have Shin Megami Tensei Devil Survivor Overclocked, comes extremely recommended from you, the Retro Rebound audience. It is one I want to do a deep dive on within the next year or so. I'm looking for my pocket for this one because when I played SMT5, that I loved. Vengeance is even better. Then I also played SMT4 Apocalypse, which then I learned was like a sequel to the original, which is like stupid. So I never really played a proper SMT game, I think the right way. So you have Devil Survivor Overclocked here, and apparently this is phenomenal and dark, and is a 2009 RPG that I think was on the original DS, now redone and much better here on the 3DS. And this is a fat complete box, by the way. Like, this thing, it's got some heft to it. So yeah, that's another great JRPG suggestion. There's also Professor Leighton and the Miracle Mask. If you're like me and you enjoy that visual novel puzzle hybrid, I'm thinking Zero Escape, Danganronpa, those style games, but maybe a little more charming and whimsical, Professor Leighton is a pretty good option for you. I've recommended this one multiple times in the past. I really enjoy this game. For most of these games, though, I'm here for the story, and I'm not afraid to say that I will oftentimes just prop up a little bit of a walkthrough and just kind of coast through the game that way. It also kind of shrinks the playtime and lets me enjoy it the most. So that's there as an option for you. I told you there's more Pokemon. We have Super Mystery Dungeon here. I wanted to suggest this because this is my personal favorite Mystery Dungeon story. I think the twist in this game is insane. Like, I always remember coasting through the first 10 to 15 hours, and I'll be honest, it kind of lulls you to sleep so that it can slap you awake with a nuts plot twist that I didn't see coming, and it completely had me hooked to my seat for the final 15 to 20 hours. Like, I went from this game's so boring to, oh my God, I need to play this game. Like, how can I get my homework done fast so I can get this game into my system? Like, so yeah, Super Mystery Dungeon is fantastic. I would say the same for Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. I got a problem though. Sometimes the change in art style hurts me big time. Like, I'm so happy we have, for my personal favorite generation of Pokemon in Gen 3, a remake that goes 3D, full effort. Like, it is so cool to see, but I've never beat this game. I've beat Emerald so many times, but I have never beat Alpha Sapphire. I've never been able to get through it. And I think the reason is because, frankly, like, the art style change, it doesn't look as appealing or as exciting to me in 3D. And like, look, I love good pixel art, but like, I'm not that much of a pixel head. So I've struggled with that many times. And I'd like to give it another shot and see how I've warmed up to it now, because it's been so long since I've done like a Gen 3 playthrough. But yeah, Alpha Sapphire, if you are not weird like me, is a great pickup. As is Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Pokemon Sun and Moon is what got me back into the series. I was down and out for a while. X and Y, I remember toying with it. I think I beat it, but I just don't remember having that same enthusiasm. But Sun and Moon came around. New setting, you had the island trials, new Pokemon, like, it felt very new. And dude, Team Skull is just, it's such a riveting story at times. Like, it's really oddly great. And so the end game for Sun and Moon is fantastic. Ultra obviously kicks things up a notch. So just wanted to give some more Pokemon love here. Then I got to give you guys, we're balancing it out, right? Like, first we got some really common, of course there's gonna be Pokemon in this video, but have you heard of 7th Dragon 3 code VFD? Possibly not. And you'll see here that you transcend time, sever fate, the curtain rises now. Very obscure JRPG that allows you to explore dungeons across 3 distinct time periods. You tap into the customization options to design your perfect dragon hunting team and take a break from the action with side quest dates and Nodin's Enterprises expansions. So yeah, this is like a really out there, different kind of JRPG from Sega, might I add. And it's one that came recommended to me from the lead artist on my game development team. He loves this game. And so I was like, all right, I'll pick it up. And that was a couple of years ago and I still have yet to play it. But I wanted to put that on your radar as one that is definitely different from the norm, right? Like, we already know our Square Enix JRPGs and stuff, but if you're looking for like a deeper cut, like me, I'd say I've played a ton of JRPGs. So that game appeals to me a lot, and that, ooh, this looks really good. And I really don't know much about it at all. So give that one a look if you have yet to check it out. Of course, Zelda is alive and well here on the Nintendo 3DS. You have arguably the definitive versions of some of the classic Zelda games in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Both have 3D options, both look really great art style wise. It's portable. It's definitely the best way to play it. The reason I did my first ever playthrough of Ocarina of Time on the 64 is because I had to capture gameplay. Otherwise, I'd be doing it here on the Nintendo 3DS. There are also exclusive 3DS games, as I'm sure you'd expect, like A Link Between Worlds. And I don't know if it's a weird Zelda fan move, but I am more preferential to these linear style, I would say Link's Awakening style Zelda games. Like, I enjoy Breath of the Wild, I enjoy Tears of the Kingdom, but if I love any Zelda game, it's Link's Awakening in any game. So A Link Between Worlds allows you to really interact with the world in a unique way, which I think is what Zelda does best, but it's also a little more linear, and in terms, I think, a little bit more palatable. And then the last game suggestion that I have for you here is Kid Icarus Uprising. This is one that's definitely gone up in price. Definitely when it comes to graphics and presentation, it's one of the more stunning games on the system. The gameplay is really action heavy, very much like you're flying through and shooting them up. It's really cool, good time. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Star Fox, I guess, but yeah, there hasn't been like much Kid Icarus love since then. Like, as far as I know, like, you just got Kid Icarus Uprising and boom, there he is in Smash, and that's my Kid Icarus knowledge there. But otherwise, that's all I got for you when it comes to DS and 3DS recommendations. A lot of good stuff here in what is absolutely our largest buying guide yet. Shout out to Josh for doing a phenomenal edit, as always, to make sure that we can get the job done here, because I know this is a chunky one, but there's a lot to be said. I could have split this up into 2 videos, but I thought that wouldn't be really considerate of your time and your subscription feed, and I'd rather just put it all in one and make you one big chunky video that you can either chip through or listen to in one go and then refer back to when you're making certain purchases. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I leave it in your hands. What games am I missing that I should pick up? What systems are you getting? Let me know down below. And with that, I'll catch all of you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.